Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how to basically make your navigation easier in Blender. If you're starting out in Blender, this is how, if you load up the default scene, this is how it will open up. Now the default settings inside of Blender doesn't make your navigation easier. Okay, so this is how the default scene opens up in Blender. By default, the settings that we have inside of Blender are not very beginner friendly, so we're gonna enable a couple of settings that will make it easier for us to get comfortable in Blender. So the first thing that I'm gonna go to Edit, Preferences, and first let's go to our input, Navigation. And in navigation, the first thing that we want to check is Orbit Around Selection. Now what does this do? By default, if you have a bunch of objects inside of your scene, and let's say some are further apart, let's say it's a big city scene, by default if you rotate around, it rotates wherever the center of the world is, right? It's just how it's set up by default, but this is not something very easy to use and to get comfortable with. So what you can do is enable Orbit Around Selection. Now basically what this is going to do is, for example, if I have this sphere selected, and now if I basically start rotating my screen around, you can see that it's rotating differently from how it was doing before, right? You can see the difference if you enable and disable this. And the reason that is that now it's rotating around this sphere particularly. So when you're working on a scene with a lot of objects, this option is going to help you a lot, right? You can easily rotate and navigate around your scene just by selecting an object, and then you can basically navigate around it. Second thing is this auto perspective option. Now this basically snaps your scene whenever you're working. So for example, if I go to view and I go to my front view, so if you're looking at some sort of beginner tutorial, usually they have their references set up, and then you're working based on those references. Now as soon as I start rotating even just a little bit, you see how my Blender screen snaps. Again, that is something that's very frustrating, especially when you're starting out. So make sure you disable this. Now if I just go to my front view again, let me disable this. Okay, basically now if I rotate, it's not going to snap, and the reason it is, it's still in orthographic view. Before, whenever I used to go to my front view, so right now it's orthographic, and as soon as I rotate, it jumps to perspective, which is why we get that sudden shift. So I'm going to disable this option. We don't need auto perspective. This third option is very important as well, zoom to mouse position. As soon as we enable this, basically what's going to happen, wherever my mouse is, that's where it's going to zoom. So if I zoom my 3D cursor over here, I place my cursor over here and I start zooming, it's going to zoom there. Anytime you have trouble zooming further, so right now I'm unable to zoom further, that's usually because you're in perspective mode. Just change this to orthographic and you can zoom in as much as you like and zoom out as much as you like as well. So now if I place my 3D cursor on this cube, I can zoom over here. If I place it around here, I can zoom here, right? Again, this is something that will make navigation much easier in Blender rather than the default, which is it just zooms in the center of the screen and then you have to pan around your scene. So just enable this option. Again, it will help you out a lot. Now next, go to our next, which is the Keymap. So by default, our spacebar action is to play animation. Not very friendly. The good use for this is the default search. This used to be the default when in the old Blenders. So just switch this to search and basically you get this small search engine inside of Blender. It basically shows you different kind of operations that you can use. So sometimes if you have forgotten something or where it is, it will show you where to get it. So for example, if I don't know how to add a bone, and I just search for bone, you can see it's giving me an option. I can either parent to a bone, I can either add a bone. So this is what I want to do. So to add a bone, I need to go to add, or I can press Shift A and then go to armature and go to bone. Now let's try it out. This is add, then we need to go to armature and then single bone, and you can see that that is super friendly. Like any tool, as long as you remember the name of it, you can search for it and it will help you and it will show you where it is. And if you just click on it from here directly, it will do that as well. So super helpful, and it should have been the default in this as well. Next, enable your tab for pie menu and pie menu on drag. Now basically what this does, by default, if I press tab to go into edit mode, it directly takes me to edit mode, which is fine. But when you're going to start working on a lot of complex projects, my suggestion would be to get more comfortable with pie menus, right? And pie menus basically look something like this. So for example, if I enable this, now if I press tab on my keyboard, okay, I also need to enable the add-on for this. Just search for pie and enable this. Okay, now if I press tab, it's going to give me a bunch of these options that I can go through. So I don't have to go to edit mode each time. I can go to all of these options that I would get if I go over here. Again, this applies to a lot of options inside of Blender. So for example, if I press this and I press X, now I get this kind of pie menu. Before, you get a single menu, which is not very friendly. And again, pie menus are super like they're very user friendly. Once you get comfortable with it, you don't even have to like look at them. You just remember the direction and you'd be able to move like automatically. It becomes muscle memory. So just enable these settings inside of Blender and you'll notice a difference at what you do. Once you are done, just save this file and these settings will be saved and they will be automatically applied whenever you open a new scene in Blender. One more thing, whenever you're working, enable meta caps. Meta caps are super helpful to work with, and then enable shadow and cavity. Basically what this is going to do is help you understand your model much better, especially when you're starting out. It's going to help you see your mistakes. Like it basically highlights your mistakes so you know if you're doing something wrong, right? So just enable these when you're working. And an extra bonus is to use this random option. So if I have a bunch of objects over here, so for example this cube and this cube, you can see they are slightly different color, and I can basically distinguish between where each of them are ending and the next one is starting. By default, the way that this is set up, you won't be able to tell any of this. So this is like the default setting. So again, it's much easier and much helpful for your eyes if you use meta caps with like these options enabled, because these are going to help you a lot. So one more thing that we can do is, for example, if I go into edit mode, you're going to see these vertices which are super small. Again, not very user friendly. So what I usually do is go to edit, preferences, and then over here go to interface. Themes. And over here we need to look for 3D viewport. Here it is. And then here I'm gonna scroll way to the end and just increase the vertex size from 3 pixels. By default, this is 3 pixels. I usually use around 7 or 8, which is much easier on the eyes. And basically you can see the difference. Now these dots are much bigger and easier to select. Let me know if you find this video helpful, and I'll be coming out with more videos.